Hello, I'm Stephen Bauman, and in this video, I'm going to be teaching you the rock bottom, foundational, absolute, most basic color theory fundamentals that you need to know to eventually start to express yourself in oil painting and in color mixing in general. All of the clips that you're going to see in this video are taken from a lesson I made for my Patreon subscribers. If you're interested in seeing the entire in-depth lesson, you can follow the link in the description of this video and subscribe at the Atelier tier, where you'll be able to access that lesson and also all of the other lessons in that library.
We're going to start out by talking about primary colors, of which there are three. We have red, that is a primary color, yellow, that is a primary color, and blue, that is also a primary color. It's these three primary colors then that we use to combine together and make the secondary colors. We have green, we have orange, and we have violet. If we take our primary colors and mix them with another primary color, we're going to wind up at a place where we have one of these secondary colors. So yellow and blue together makes green. Yellow and red together, of course, make orange. And red mixed together with blue is going to give us violet. So far, super simple, right? Now, a tertiary color is essentially two additional steps down the line from a primary color. And we get them by mixing together a secondary and a primary. So yellow mixed together with green is going to give us our first tertiary color, and that is yellow-green. Our second tertiary color is yellow-orange. Our third tertiary color is red-orange. After that, we have red-violet, we have blue-violet, and we have blue-green. So to review, we have three primary colors. We also have three secondary colors, and we have six tertiary colors. This is color wheel vocabulary at its most basic. The next thing we're going to talk about in this most basic color wheel that we have here is something that I think is probably one of the most important topics that you'll need to assimilate moving forward. And that is understanding the basic divide in between warm and cool colors. Now, this is a technical division. We're not talking here about colors that feel warm or conjure up some warm emotion. We're talking about proximity on the color wheel to blue or to orange. What I'm going to do is split the color wheel down this axis. On one side of this, we have warm colors, and on the other side, cool. There's probably a lot of different ways that we can explain the warm-cool concept, but let's just say that colors that contain some noticeable quantity of blue are going to be considered cool, whereas those not containing that noticeable quantity of blue are going to be warm colors. Now, why is the warm-cool distinction so important? It defines a lot of the different effects that you're going to be shooting for when you're making your oil paintings. Colors appear most lively to our eye when they're juxtaposed against their opposite. Some of the compositions that I'm going to show you later really bear this out. Oftentimes, you'll find a large quantity of analogous warm colors juxtaposed against a small amount of something cool that creates a kind of accent and activates the warm side of the temperature scale. Let's talk analogous colors. If we have one color that we start out with, the colors immediately flanking it on the color wheel are analogous to that color. So in this case, yellow-orange, red-orange, and orange are analogous colors. And all of the other colors on the color wheel follow suit with that same idea. Now let's talk complementary colors. A complementary color is the color that we find across from another on the color wheel. It's interesting to note that the three primary colors do not have complements among themselves. They are essentially a triad. But once we include secondaries and tertiaries, we have opportunities to have complementary colors. The complement to blue then is going to be orange. Yellow is going to be violet, red is going to be green, blue-violet is going to be yellow-orange, red-violet is going to be yellow-green, and blue-green is going to be red-orange. The reason it's important to know the mechanics of complementary colors is because one color will actually neutralize the other in terms of saturation. So if we have a very highly saturated yellow and we want to neutralize it, we would reach for whatever we had on the palette that could equate to a violet. A lot of times, in practical terms, that's going to be a mixture of something like a cobalt blue and a vermilion. Mix those two together, you essentially get the most violet color you can, which will act as a complement to yellow and will thus decrease or neutralize the saturation of that yellow. The next word we're going to define, I think, gets misused a lot. We're going to talk about the word hue. A lot of times people will use the word hue to describe a color. They'll say that orange is a hue, red-orange is a hue, red is a hue. And while that's not entirely incorrect, it's also not quite specifically what hue means. The word hue describes which of the 12 wavelengths of color is the dominant wavelength of a color. It becomes important because eventually a lot of the colors that we see aren't presented to us in such a way that they are at their purest expression. A lot of times a green in a painting or in nature will be expressed in a very low saturation, which almost makes it look like a gray. But here we can still say this is a green because the dominant color in that mixture, the one that really stands out, is green. So in this case, the hue is green. Also in this case, the hue is green. The next thing you need to know is value. What do we mean when we say the word value? What we're talking about is on a gray scale, what is the lightness or darkness of a particular color?
Each of the colors then is assigned a specific value. This becomes particularly important for an oil painter when you're trying to balance hue, value, and chroma without making your mixture too dark or too light.
Now we've talked about value and we've talked about hue. Now I want to talk to you about chroma. You could say chroma is almost synonymous with saturation. And what we're talking about is how pure the particular expression of a color is. When we talked before about hue, we said what is the dominant color inside the mixture? In this thread, we clearly have blue. Down here we have a highly chromatic blue. Here we have a very desaturated or low chroma blue. Nonetheless, the hue is blue. Here we have a high chroma blue. Here, a low chroma blue. Eventually, in my practical color lesson, you're going to hear me talking about high chroma mixtures or high chroma colors and low chroma colors. This then is what I'm talking about in that context. We have a fantastic painting by Thomas Wilmer Dewing. Here we have a highly analogous color scheme. We have lots of greens, we have lots of blues, we have lots of full greens, we have lots of blue greens, and of course we have a typical but desaturated blue in the sky. All these colors then have a relatively tight relationship in a color space. But are they all alone? Is it almost a monochromatic composition? Absolutely not. Dewing draws your attention to one of the central characters by doing what? By choosing a complementary color for the hair of his model. In addition, we find small notes of orange also in the other model, inside of an overwhelmingly cool context. What we end up with in the end is something that is tantamount to a complementary color scheme in this painting. An overwhelming proportion of cool, balanced by a small and therefore much more noticeable presence of very warm temperature. Finally, we have this painting by Joseph de Camp. I chose it because he's created a very beautiful harmony of a vast variety of different hues. We can find strong chromatic reds, we can find chromatic greens, we can find soft but saturated blues, the yellows of some of her flesh tones, and though each color is relatively strong in its ultimate expression here, we find that they all harmonize really, really well. There can be a lot of different reasons for this, but what I want to point to here is a concept that I heard about Vermeer years and years ago. It's about color intensity and proportion. And it said that in a picture they should have an inverse relationship. The more chromatic the color that you use, the smaller amount of space it should occupy, and therefore the larger amount of space a color is occupying, the less chroma it should have. So what do we find in this massive background behind her? We find relatively low chroma hues. And where do we find our highest chroma in the various hues that are represented here? Relatively small and discrete areas that he wants to draw particular attention to. Now, I wasn't there, of course, when de Camp designed this painting, and I can't say that chromatic proportion was in his mind when he did, but I can say that over the years, throughout the arts and art history, there are certain truths that we can understand about color.
That brings us to the end of this lesson on color theory fundamentals. If you're interested in learning all of the rest of the stuff that I cover in this lesson, you can follow the link in the description of this video to my Patreon page, where you will find it at the Atelier tier. That being said, at this moment, you should feel prepared with the basic vocabulary you need to figure out how to work as an oil painter in the world of color and use color theory to better express yourself as an artist. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'm Stephen Bauman, and if you like the content here on this channel, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the next one.